I'm talking with Jinny Yang here at Standard Bank in the Isle of Man. Jinny, you're on the Isle of Man to do a presentation to some of your clients all about the goings on back in China, which is obviously a fascination for a lot of people. You've had some boom times and now not so hot maybe, but over to you, because that's what you're going to talk about. Life over there, the economy, and how maybe it even reflects on us and on a global situation.
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be on the Isle of Man. I've learnt also a great deal, one of which is that the Isle of Man's GDP growth is actually more than China's GDP growth at the moment.
If you believe all those statistics, yeah, well.
As far as I understand,
do you always believe those statistics?
You mean the Chinese statistics?
Well, any statistics. Isn't that your job to drill down? And
absolutely. So if you don't believe in statistics, you only have to look at the business community, sure, see what the economic activity there is. And so far, what I can tell is business is thriving on the island. The island is very diversified in its economy. So with that, obviously, China being second largest economy in the world, clearly China will have also an impact on the island to some extent. Maybe some of the end users of some of the businesses on the island will be Chinese, for example. So if China is slowing down, it also means that maybe consumers are less willing to spend, consumers are less willing to invest, businesses are less willing to invest. And this is some of the topics I will be talking about in my presentation. How does China's slowdown impact on the global economy, every corner of the world?
It's been the powerhouse, hasn't it? I mean, for so long. Where's the next big thing going to happen?
Well, so China's growing at 6.4%.
Which is still great.
Which is still very much outpacing most Western economies. However, the structure of China's economy is changing. So from a maybe investment-led economy towards a consumption-driven economy, and also one that is based on the services sector now. More employment is done by the services sector. So that has implications. For example, in terms of income in China, I looked at some of those statistics again, and I saw that per capita GDP, for example, on the island is as much as 4 times that of the most wealthy city in China. Wow. So to put things into perspective, the island is much, much wealthier than even the wealthiest city in China. And that perhaps is against some perceptions, because we tend to think of very top end, China's wealthy, population as very, very rich, obviously. And there are some, but those are the minority. The majority of China's population are still very much below global average income levels, which means that China's slowdown will have an implication for their employment, for their standards of living. So I think in terms of going forward, China is trying to build connectivity with the rest of the world. It realizes just by pumping credit into the economy, so that means lending more money into the economy, that creates financial risks. And therefore what China must do is to increasingly open up to the rest of the world. One of the key initiatives I'm going to be talking about later on is China's Belt and Road Initiative. This initiative is about China recreating the ancient trade routes with the rest of the world, from Asia, across Central Asia, towards Europe and even Africa. And this is actually maybe an initiative that tries to encourage more and more nations, particularly emerging economies, to try and also be part of it. What it's about is trying to create more opportunities for infrastructure investment. Globally, there's estimated to be about $8 trillion worth of infrastructure investment that's needed right now, but actually we're far, far away from actually gaining the financing needed for those.
Where's it going though? I mean, obviously it has been so successful, the economy, but I mean, what's your long-term views?
Long-term view is China will undoubtedly slow down. However, the income levels will rise. As China goes towards a more consumption-based economy, even if the GDP growth is slowing down, the country will become wealthier. The industries that will benefit on the back of GDP growth will be more diversified. And most importantly, the quality of growth. So if we're talking about numbers here, you know, we simply focus on the quantity of growth, but actually it's more about the quality of growth. If China can even grow at, say, 2-3%, but it's sustainable growth, green growth, those that will benefit more of the population, that will be China's ambitions.
And the world situation, Hawaii, I'm thinking about, and these sort of things, do they play a major part now that there's still concern about China, the way it is governed, the way it operates under their system, but sort of invite the private businesses in, but they are still very much there where they run things, and they have done for many, many years. You know, it's how do you kind of sum that one up with, like, the Hawaii situation, you know, telecoms?
So from the private community, because I'm a chief economist, a chief China economist of a bank, and I think China has found it very difficult to try and maybe make sure that perceptions are not reality. And that goes hand in hand with things like, you know, language issues, language barriers. Trying to get its message across the international community has been quite a challenge for China. So one of the key things I think is that, yes, there will be Chinese brands rising globally. And that shouldn't be a surprise to us. It's the second largest economy in the world. If you think about all the US brands across the world, there are many, many. And even if you use any, say, Western brands, you'll find that parts are also manufactured and also invented in China. So even if you think that you could maybe block a few names in terms of, you know, accessing the country, you know, you cannot deny the rise of China, because every part of globally manufacturing, a lot of it is done by China, and increasingly innovation is coming from China. And this is why 5G is a very important one. China is increasingly looking to do you know, research and you know, investment and development in innovation in 5G technology, digital economy, fintech, payment systems. And if China is investing into these, and clearly what happens is that they become more competitive, they become better than maybe other rivalries at what they do. So rather than perhaps you know, being fearful of the rise of Chinese names, maybe what we need to do is to understand, you know, first of all, understand the challenges, but also embrace it by mutually working with each other. For example, if research centers are being set up across the world together with these Chinese companies to try and help them understand that in different jurisdictions, you're no longer just operating in China, you are operating globally, therefore you have a global responsibility, not just a Chinese responsibility. And so I think that is really, for me, the mutual understanding and coexisting with each other is really the solution to this problem.
Well, you've been telling us a lot about China. Will you be going back to saying a lot about the Isle of Man? I mean, are we undervalued in the world, do you think? You didn't know much about it, and do you think we can punch higher here above our weight, really, and our size?
Well, absolutely. I think size isn't everything. It's about the quality, as I said, and it seems like the quality of growth here, the quality of regulation, quality of the legal system, because we are the rule-based system, is very much something that China can learn from. And I already discovered many of my networks in China domestically have actually started to establish a dialogue with the local universities, with the businesses, and I think that will continue to thrive as long as we understand each other and we are open to changes and also open to new ideas. I think obviously there will be some positivity in the future relationship between the Isle of Man and China. And I only hope that despite Brexit, and there I've said it, the B word.
You brought the B word up. You had to spoil everything.
I think everyone will have been bored by it, but and actually, you know, China will think this is a breath of fresh air. We don't just have to talk about politics. We are purely talking, you know, the business opportunities, the education opportunities, for example, and because let's face it, we are, you know, inundated with uncertainties around the world. If you create some sort of certainty, at least in that, you know, the emphasis and the strategy going forward is increasing dialogue, increasing mutual understanding, then that is enough, I think, to build the relationship. And
finally, just slightly outside of the economic thing, you know, the human rights issue, do you think that still is something the people are concerned about globally?
globally human rights will continue to be an issue, but increasingly it's environmental rights, and it's an environment people care about. And this is why one of the research pieces I launched recently is all about green belt and road, so greening the economic potential of a lot of the emerging economies. And I think China has a responsibility, and so does the West. And this is an area, so green development, fintech, a digital age, those are the type of topics I think both the West and China can really work towards and really have the responsibility to deliver on that front.